Hello students, welcome to Consumer Electronics class. Today we are going to see about the communication systems in consumer electronics. So which are all the communication system or devices that we are using in consumer electronics? Let's see that. In communication systems, we are going to see today about cardless telephones, fax machine, PDAs, tablets, smartphones, and smart watches. So let's see. I'll give a brief intro to each of the items. The first one is a cardless telephone. The cardless telephone is a portable telephone, right? You would have seen that. Look at the picture. This is a telephone in which the handset is portable and but able to be used like landline phone communication, but it only operates by radio frequency transmission and not by a physical insulated wire or a telephone line. There is a base station, and the base station is connected to the telephone network through a telephone line. Simple, as a corded telephone. It's a base station, and is also serves as a charger charge the handset batteries. So you can see that battery and a base station, right? Sorry, the handset and the base station. The range is limited, usually to the same building or some short distance from the base station. You can carry the phone, which is connected to the or in the short range to the base station. Cardless telephone. This cardless telephone differs from a mobile telephone by the limited range and by the base station on the subscriber premises. The current cordless telephone standards, such as PHS or DECT, have blurred the once clear-cut line between the cordless and the mobile phones by implementing cell handoff. That's called handover. That's a one thing difference, no? Handoff, and it has got various advanced features like data transfer or even on a limited scale international roaming. In specialized models, the base stations are maintained by a commercial mobile network operator, and users subscribe to the service. In 1994, digital cardless phones in the 900 megahertz frequency range were introduced. Digital signals allowed the phones to be more secure and decreased eavesdropping. It was relatively easy to eavesdrop on an analog cardless phone conversation. But in digital, it's not possible. In 1995, digital spread spectrum, that's called DSS, digital spread spectrum was introduced for cordless phones. So this technology enabled the digital voice transmission to be spread over multiple frequencies, improving privacy and reducing the interference between different subscribers. Unlike the corded telephone, the cordless telephone needs mains electricity to power the base station. The cordless handset is powered by a rechargeable battery, which is charged when the handset is stored in its cradle. You look at the figure, you can see that, understand. Let's see the performance of cordless telephone. Many cordless phones in the early 21st century are digital. Digital technology has helped provide a clear sound and it limits the casual eavesdropping, right? Many cordless phones have one main base station, and it can add up to 3 or 4 additional bases. This allows for multiple voice channels that allow three-way conference calls between the bases. This technology also allows multiple handsets to be used at the same time, and up to 2 handsets can have a separate conversation with outside parties. That's how it has been established. Its performance was very good actually. In my office also, I had such cordless phones. Now it is not there. Manufacturers usually advertise that their higher frequency systems improve audio quality and range. In ideal case, higher frequencies have worse signal propagation as seen by the basic FRIIS transmission equation, and it has got a path loss, tends to increase at higher frequencies as well. Practical influences on quality and range are signal strength, antenna quality, the method of modulation used, and interference, which varies locally. These are the performance of cardless phone. You heard about POTS, plain old telephone services, POTS, plain old telephone services, the landlines. These are designed to transfer audio with a quality that is just adequate for the parties to understand each other. Typically, the bandwidth will be 3.6 kilohertz, only a fraction of the frequencies that the humans can hear, but enough to make the voice intelligible. No phone handset can improve on this quality, but it's a limitation, right, on the phone system itself. Higher quality phones can transfer the signal, this kind of signal, to the handset with less interference over a greater range. Most cordless telephones, no matter what frequency band or transmission method is used, this will hardly ever exactly match the sound quality of a high quality wired telephone attached to a good telephone line. It will match. This limitation is caused by a number of issues. One is a side tone. It's like side tone is hearing one's own voice echoed in the receiver speaker. The second one is a noticeable amount of constant background noise. That's not an interference from outside sources, but noise within the cordless telephone system. A third one is a frequency response, not being the full frequency response available in the wired landline telephone. So most manufacturers claim a range about 30 meters for their 2.4 gigahertz or 5.8 gigahertz system, but inexpensive models, right, often fall short of this claim. 30 meters is not possible. However, the higher frequency often brings advantages. The 900 megahertz and 2.4 gigahertz band are increasingly being used for a host of other devices, including baby monitor, microwave oven, Bluetooth, and wireless LAN. So that it is likely that a cordless phone will suffer interference from signals broadcast by those devices and also may itself generate interference. It is also possible for a cordless phone to interfere with the 802.11a. It's a wireless standard, right? 802.11a wireless standard. It may interfere with that, as a 802.11a standard can be configured to operate in the 5.8 gigahertz range. So, however, this can easily be fixed by reconfiguring the wireless LAN device to work in the 5.18 gigahertz to 5.32 gigahertz band. The newer 1.9 gigahertz band is reserved for use by phones that use the DECT standard, which should avoid interference issues that are increasingly being seen in unlicensed 900 megahertz or 2.4 gigahertz or 5.8 gigahertz bands. You can see that now 1.9 is reserved now. Let's discuss about the security. Many analog phone signals are easily picked up by radio scanners, allowing anyone within the range to listen in on conversations. Though it is illegal in many countries, it is possible. Though many such analog models are still produced, modern digital technology is available to reduce the risk of eavesdropping. Digital spread spectrum (DSS) typically uses frequency hopping to spread the audio signal over a much wider range of frequencies in a pseudo-random way. So the audio signal may be the bandwidth is 3 kilohertz actually, but it will jump. Spreading the signal over a wider bandwidth is a form of redundancy and increases the signal to noise ratio. What happens then? Yielding longer range and less susceptibility to interfere. It's very difficult to interfere actually. Higher frequency bands provide more room for those wideband signals. To an analog receiver like a scanner, A DSS signal sounds like bursts of noise. Only the base unit using the matching pseudo random number can decode the signal, and it chooses from one of thousands of such unique codes each time the handset is returned to the cradle. Additionally, the digital nature of the signal increases its tolerance to noise, and some systems even encrypt the digital signal for additional security. Let's see about the handsets, cardless phone handsets. Roaming cardless phone handsets exist, which are not tethered to any particular base station, but which also do not use traditional mobile phone networks. These most commonly use digital technologies like DECT, 2.4 GHz unlicensed spectrum, or 802.11a or B or G standards based wireless LAN technology. The cardless phone handset must connect to a wireless access point or a base station that supports the same technology. Also required is a call management function and a gateway to the public switched telephone network PSTN. This may or may not be integrated in the base station. A voice over IP service VoIP can be used by phones that use wireless data access points, thus using a broadband internet connection to defer the connection to the PSTN to a remote gateway operated by a service provider that is close to the call's destination. Analog equivalents do exist, but at the same time it can provide longer reach, but with the potential loss of confidentiality and voice quality. Most digital systems have inherent encryption or offer optional encryption. Now let's see about the fax machines. Fax, short form of facsimile, FACSIMILE, facsimile. It's a fax. Short form is fax. Sometimes it is called as a telecopying or telefax. Telefax is a short form of telefacsimile. A fax is a telephonic transmission of a scanned printed material. The printed material may be a text material or an image, but it's a telephonic transmission of that scanned printed material, normally to a telephone number connected to the printer or any output device. The original document is scanned with a fax machine or a telecopier, which processes the content. That's maybe a text or image, right, on the paper. It processes the content as a single fixed graphic image. It's like an image. It will convert into a bitmap, and then it will transmit the bitmap through a telephone system in the form of audio frequency tones. So what happens then? The receiving fax machine receives the audio frequency tones and it interprets the tones and it reconstructs the image and printing on a paper copy. Earlier, the systems used direct conversion of image darkness to audio tone in a continuous or analog manner. But from 1980s, most machines modulate the transmitted audio frequencies using a digital representation of the page, which is compressed to quickly transmit areas which are all white or all black. So the compression was used. Let us see the capabilities of fax machines. So there are several indicators of fax capabilities: group, class, data transmission rate, and conformance with the ITU-T standards or recommendation. Earlier, the ITU-T has been called as CCITT. Since the 1968 Carter phone decision, most fax machines have been designed to connect to standard PSTN lines and telephone numbers. So let's see one by one. Group. First one is a group. It's got analog or digital. So analog is group 1 and 2 faxes are sent in a same manner as a frame of analog television. with each scanned line transmitted as a continuous analog signal. The horizontal resolution dependent on the quality of the scanner, transmission line, and the printer. Analog fax machines are obsolete nowadays and no longer manufactured. ITU-T recommendations, that is T.2 and T.3, were withdrawn as obsolete in July 1996 itself. Analog fax machine is not available nowadays. Second one is a digital. A major breakthrough in the development of the modern facsimile system was the result of a digital technology where the analog signal from scanners was digitized and then compressed, resulting in the ability to transmit high rates of data across standard telephone lines. The first digital fax machine was the Dacom Rapid Fax. It's first sold in late 1960s, which incorporated digital data compression technology developed by Lockheed for transmission of images from satellites. Fax over IP, FOIP, there's a technology. Fax over IP can transmit and receive pre-digitized documents at near real-time speeds using ITU-T recommendation T.38 to send the digitized images over an IP network using a JPEG compression. This T.38 is designed to work with VoIP services and often supported by analog telephones adapters used by legacy fax machines, old fax machine, and that need to convert or connect through a VoIP service. The scanned documents are limited to the amount of time the user takes to load the document in a scanner and for the device to process to a digital file. The resolution can vary from as little as 150 dpi dots per inch, or it can go up to 9600 dpi or more. This type of faxing is not related to the email to fax service but still uses the fax modems at least one way. Next type is class. Okay, next capability is class. Computer modems are often designated by a particular fax class, which indicates how much processing is offloaded from the computer CPU to the fax modem. So first one is a class 1. It's also known as class 1.0. These kind of fax devices do fax data transfer, while the T.4 or T.6 data compression and T30 session management are performed by software on a controlling computer. This is described in ITU-T standard recommendation called T.31. You can Google and find out. Next one is what is commonly known as class 2. Is an unofficial class of fax devices that perform T.30 session management themselves. But T.4 and T.6 data compression is performed by software or on a controlling computer, separate. Implementation of this class are based on it's a versions, some standard version by ITU-T that eventually evolved to become class 2.0 later. All implementations of class 2 are manufacturer specific. Class 2.0 is an official ITU-T version of class 2 and it is commonly known as class 2.0 to differentiate it from the many manufacturer specific implementation of what is commonly known as class 2. This class 2.0 uses a different but standardized command set than the other various manufacturer specific implementations of class 2. The relevant ITU-T recommendation is T.32. The class 1 is T.31, class 2 is T.32. Next one is a class 2.1. Is an improvement of class 2.0 that implements faxing over V.34. It is high speed, 33.6 kilobits per second, which boosts faxing speed from fax classes 2 and 2.0, which are limited to 14.4 kilobits per second, but this is 33.6 kilobits per second. Very fast. The relevant ITU-T recommendation is T.32 Amendment 1. So same, but this is a different amendment. Class 2.1 fax devices are referred to as Super G3. Next one is a data transmission rate. Several different telephone line modulation techniques, not television. So, telephone line modulation techniques are used. It's like PSK, QAM, TCM. QAM is being used in video, in television also. But telephone we are using in a PSK, QAM, TCM, and digital. So these are used by fax machine also. They are negotiated during the fax modem handshake, and the fax devices will use the highest data rate that both fax devices support, usually a minimum of 14.4 kilobits per second for group 3 fax. Look at the table. The table says the standard and the release date, data rate supported, and modulation method. You can see from V.27, V.29, V.17, V.34, V.34 bits, ISDN. ISDN is the latest one. See that ISDN supports 64,000 bits per second. It's in a digital method mode, digital modulation method. Last one is a compression. Okay, compression. So as well as specifying the resolution of the image being faxed, the ITU-T T.4 recommendation specifies 2 compression methods for decreasing the amount of data that needs to be transmitted between the fax machines to transfer the image. The 2 methods defined in T.4 are modified Huffman, that's called MH, or modified Reed. Reed means relative element address designate. So it is optional, but these 2 are recommended by T.4. The T.6, there is another recommendation that recommends modified read, modified read, double modified read, MMR. Later, other compression techniques were added as an option of ITU-T recommendation as T.30, such as JBIG, it's for bi-level content, and JPEG, T.43, MRC, T.45 for grayscale or palette or color content. Fax machines can negotiate at the start of the T.30 session to use the best technique implemented on both sides. That way, first standard is fixed, then the fax machine will work. Let us see about Personal Digital Assistant, PDA. Personal Digital Assistant. The Personal Digital Assistant, PDA, this is also known as handheld PC. It's a variety mobile device which functions as a personal information manager. PDAs have been mostly displaced by the widespread adoption of high-capable smartphones, in particular those based on iOS or Android. Nearly all modern PDAs have the ability to connect to the internet. A PDA has an electronic visual display, letting it include a web browser. Most models also have audio capabilities, allowing usage as a portal media player, and also enabling most of them to be used as a telephones. Most PDAs can access the internet, intranet, or extranets via Wi-Fi or wireless WANs. Sometimes, instead of buttons, PDAs employ touchscreen technology. The technology industry has recently recycled the term personal digital assistant. The term is more commonly used for software that identifies a user's voice to reply to the queries. Let us see about the typical features of PDA. A typical PDA has a touchscreen for navigation, a memory card slot for data storage, and IRDA or Bluetooth or Wi-Fi. However, some PDAs may not have a touchscreen, using a soft keys, a directional pad, and a numeric keypad or a thumb keyboard for input. To have the functions expected of a PDA, a device software typically includes an appointment calendar, a to-do list, an address book for contacts, a calculator, and some sort of memo program. It's like a note program. PDAs with wireless data connections also typically include an email client and a web browser, and sometimes may or may not include telephone functionality. What is touchscreen then? So many of the original PDAs, such as the Apple's Newton and Palm's Pilot, featured a touchscreen for user interaction, having only few buttons, usually reserved for shortcuts to often used programs. Some touchscreen PDAs, including Windows Media or Windows mobile devices, had a detachable stylus, like a pen kind of thing, to facilitate making selections. The user interacts with the device by tapping the screen to select the buttons or issue commands, or by dragging a finger or a finger or a stylus, by dragging a finger on the screen to make selections or scroll. The typical methods for entering text on touchscreen PDAs include virtual keyboard, sometimes where a keyboard is shown on the touchscreen. Text is entered by tapping on screen keyboard with a finger or stylus. Virtual keyboard, or sometimes with a external keyboard connected via USB or infrared port or Bluetooth. Some users may choose a wired keyboard for one-handed use. Another way of entering text is handwriting recognition, where letters or words are written on the touchscreen, often with the stylus, and the PDA converts the input to text. Recognition and computation of handwritten horizontal and vertical formulas such as 1 plus 2 is equal to, if you write it, then it will give an answer. May also be a feature, right? It's a feature. 1 plus 2 is equal to writing that. Next method of entering text is stroke recognition. Okay, stroke recognition allows the user to make a predefined set of strokes on the touch screen, sometimes in a special input area, representing the various characters to be the input. The strokes are often simplified character shapes, making them easier for the device to recognize. Within a small space, you can type A only, then it will recognize the letter. Then you have to write P, then you can write P, then L, then E, then it will identify it as Apple. One widely known stroke recognition system is the Palm's Graffiti. Despite research and development projects, end user experience mixed results with the handwriting and recognition system. Some find it frustrating and inaccurate, while others are satisfied with the quality of the recognition. This is about the touchscreen. Next one is about the memory cards. Although many early PDAs did not have memory card slots, now most have either some form of digital secure digital slot, that's called the SD slot, secured digital, or a compact flash slot, or a combination of these two. Although designed for memory, the secure digital input-output SDIO and compact flash cards are available that provide accessories like Wi-Fi or digital cameras if the device can support them. Some PDAs can have a USB port, mainly for a USB flash drives. Some PDAs use a micro SD cards, which are electronically compatible with the SD cards but have a much smaller physical size. Next one is wired connectivity. So while early PDAs connected to the user's personal computer via serial ports or another proprietary connection, many today connect through a USB cable. Older PDAs were unable to connect to each other via USB, as their implementations of USB did not support acting as a host. Some early PDAs were able to connect to the internet directly or indirectly by means of an external modem connected via PDA serial port or sync connector, or directly by using an expansion card that provided an Ethernet port. That's a wired connectivity. Next one is a wireless connectivity. Most modern PDAs have Bluetooth, a popular wireless protocol for mobile devices. Bluetooth can be used to connect keyboards, headsets, GPS receivers, and other nearby accessories. It is also possible to transfer files between PDAs that have Bluetooth. Many modern PDAs have Wi-Fi wireless network connectivity, and it can connect to Wi-Fi hotspots. All smartphones and some other modern PDAs can connect to the wireless wide area networks, such as those provided by the cellular telecommunication companies. Older PDAs from the 1990s to 2006 typically had an IRDA infrared port, allowing short range line of sight wireless communication. Few current models use this technology as it has been supplanted by Bluetooth and Wi-Fi. IRDA, that's an infrared device port. IRDA allows communication between two PDAs or between a PDA and any device with IRDA port or adapter. Some printers have IRDA receivers allowing IRDA equipped PDAs to print to them. If the PDA's operating system supports it, it will print. Universal PDA keyboards designed for these older PDAs use a infrared technology. Infrared technology is a low cost and has the advantage of being allowed aboard. Next one is the synchronization. Most PDAs can synchronize their data with applications on a user's computer. This allows the user to update contact, update schedule, or other information on their computer using a software such as Microsoft Outlook or ACT, and have the same data transferred to PDA or transfer updated information from the PDA back to the computer. So this eliminates the need for the user to update their data in two places. Synchronization also prevents the loss of information stored on the device if it is lost or stolen or destroyed. When the PDA is repaired or replaced, it can be resynced with the computer, restoring the user's data. Some users find that the data input is quicker on their computer than on their PDA, since text input via the touchscreen or a small scale keyboard is slower than the full size keyboard. Transferring data to a PDA via the computer is therefore a lot quicker from the computer. Is quicker. Having to manually input all data on the handheld device, just pushed from the computer. Most PDAs come with the ability to synchronize to the computer. This is done through synchronization software provided with the handheld or sometimes with the computer's operating system. Next one is a wireless synchronization. So far what you have seen is the synchronization. Now specifically on wireless synchronization, some PDAs can synchronize some or all of their data using their wireless technology or wireless networking capabilities, rather than having to be connected directly to the personal computer via a cable. Devices running Palm's WebOS or Google's Android operating system primarily sync with the cloud. For example, if Gmail is used, information in contacts, email, calendar can be synchronized between the PDA and the Google servers. RIM, that sells BlackBerry Enterprise Server to corporations so that the corporate BlackBerry users can wirelessly synchronize their PDAs with the company's Microsoft Exchange Server, IBM Lotus Domino, or novel GroupWise servers. Email, calendar entries, contacts, tasks, and memos kept on the company server are automatically synchronized with the BlackBerry. So what are the operating systems in PDA? Operating systems of PDA. The most common operating system pre-installed on PDAs are Palm OS. Second one is Microsoft Windows Mobile with the Windows CE kernel. It's a pocket PC. Some other operating systems are available. They are rarely used. One is Epoch, EPOC. Then old days we call it as a Symbian OS. It is used in mobile phone and PDA combinations. Sometimes Linux has been used. For example, is VR3, iPac, Sharp Zaurus PDA, OPIE, GPE, familiar Linux, kind of thing. Another operating system is Newton operating system. Another one is QNX. Now it is called as iPac actually. So these are the operating systems used. Now let's automobile navigation. Yeah, automobile navigation. Some PDAs include GPS receivers, global positioning system receivers. This is particularly true of smartphones. Other PDAs are compatible with the external GPS receiver. That's GPS receiver add-ons that use the PDA's processor and screen to display location information. PDAs with the GPS functionality can be used for automotive navigation. PDAs are increasingly being fitted as a standard on new cars. PDA-based GPS can also display traffic conditions, perform dynamic routing, and show known locations of roadside mobile radar guns. TomTom, Garmin, and IGO. These software, GPS navigation software. These are all very good software for PDAs. Ruggedized. What is the meaning of ruggedized? Some businesses and government organizations rely upon rugged PDAs, sometimes known as enterprise digital assistants, EDAs, or mobile computers for mobile data applications. But these PDAs have features that make them more robust and able to handle inclement weather, jolt, and moisture. EDAs often have extra features for data capture, such as barcode readers, radio frequency identification readers, magnetic strip card readers, or smart card readers. These features are designed to facilitate the use of these devices to scan in product or item codes. What are the applications of PDA? I have listed out many. You see that. Access control and security. It's the most widely used. Capital assessment or asset maintenance. Capital asset maintenance. Facilities maintenance and management. Then infection control audit and surveillance within the healthcare environments. Medical treatment and record keeping in hospitals. They use PDAs. Meter readings by utilities. I have seen in Bangalore, people are coming with the PDAs to take the reading from electricity meters. Military. Sometimes, US Army and Pakistan Army are using it. Package delivery. You can see that now some delivery boys are using these kind of PDAs. Park and wildlife rangers, they use it. And parking enforcement, they are using PDAs. Route accounting, they are using it. Supply chain management, that is very, very important actually. Supply chain management in warehouses, they are using PDAs. Taxi cab allocation and routing, they are using PDAs. You can see they in their taxis. And waiter and waitress application in restaurant and hospital venues. Wildlife biologists, these people are using personal digital assistant applications. These are the applications. Next one is a tablet computer. See, a tablet computer, commonly shortened to tablet, is a mobile device, typically with a mobile operating system and a touchscreen display, processing circuitry, and a rechargeable battery in a single thin and flat package. Tablets, being computers, do what other personal computers do, but lack some input output abilities that others have. Modern tablets largely resemble modern smartphones. The only difference is being the tablets are relatively larger than smartphones with the screens 7 inch, that's 18 centimeter, or much larger, measured diagonally. You have to measure diagonally, okay, and may not support access to the cellular network. That's called tablet. The touchscreen display is operated by gestures executed by fingers or a digital pen, that's called stylus, instead of the mouse, touchpad, and keyboard of a large computer. I use stylus. Portable computers can be classified according to the presence and appearance of physical keyboards. Two species of tablet, that's called slate and booklet, do not have physical keyboards and usually accept text and other inputs by use of a virtual keyboard shown on their touchscreen display. To compensate for their lack of physical keyboard, most tablets can connect to an independent physical keyboards via Bluetooth or USB. Two-in-one PCs have keyboards distinct from tablets. The form of the tablet was conceptualized in the middle of the 20th century. Stanley Kubrick depicted fictional tablets in 1968 science fiction film. What is that science fiction film? A Space Odyssey in 1968. And this is prototyped and developed in the last 2 decades of the century, of that century, 20th century. In 2010, Apple released the iPad, the first mass market tablet to achieve widespread popularity. Thereafter, tablets rapidly rose in ubiquity and soon became a large product category used for personal, educational, and workplace applications. With the sales stabilizing in the mid 2010s. Popular uses for a tablet PC including viewing presentations, video conferencing, reading ebooks, and watching movies and sharing photos and more. The market for tablet is split pretty evenly between Apple's iPad and Android tablets. With the iPads a bit more popular globally, still virtually all countries use Android tablets more. Some countries favor one or the other to a larger degree, while often the split is mostly even, 50-50 percentage. Let's see the types of tablet computers. Tablets can be loosely grouped into several categories by physical size, kind of operating system installed, or input output technology and its uses. First one is a slate. The size of the slate varies, but slate begins at 6 inches. Some models in the larger than 10 inch category include the Samsung Galaxy Tab Pro 12.2 at 12.2 inches. It's like a scale, bigger scale. Toshiba Excite at 13.3 inches. And the Dell XPS 18 at 18.4 inches. 18 inch, 12 inches is 1 feet scale. 18 is 1.5 feet. As of March 2013, the thinnest tablet on the market was Sony Xperia Tablet Z at only 0.27 inches. It is 7 millimeter thickness. On September 9, 2015, Apple released the iPad Pro with the 12.9 inches screen size, larger than the regular iPad actually. That's a slate. Next one is a mini tablet. Mini tablet are smaller and weigh less than slates, with typical screen size between 7 to 8 inches or 18 to 20 centimeter. The first commercially successful mini tablets were introduced by Amazon.com. That's called Kindle Fire. I have a Kindle actually. I used to read story books and other books through Kindle only. Amazon.com. Barnes and Noble Company, they released a Nook tablet, and Samsung released Galaxy Tab in 2011. And Google released Nexus 7 in 2012. They all operate identically to ordinary tablet but have lower specifications compared to them. On September 14, 2012, Amazon Incorporation released an upgraded version of Kindle Fire, that's called Kindle Fire HD, with a higher screen resolution and more features compared to its predecessor, it remaining only 7 inches. In October 2012, Apple released the iPad mini with a 7.9-inch screen size and about 2 inches smaller than the regular iPad, but less powerful than the then current iPad 3. But in July 24, 2013, Google released an upgraded version of the Nexus 7 with a full HD display, dual cameras, stereo speakers, and more color accuracy, performance improvement, built-in wireless charging, and a variant with 4G LTE support for AT&T and T-Mobile and Verizon. It's like a mini computer kind of thing. In September 2013, Amazon further updated the Fire tablet with the Kindle Fire HDX. In 2013, November, Apple released iPad mini 2, which remained as 7.9 inches but nearly matched the hardware of iPad Air. That's a mini tablet. Next one is Phablet. Phablet. Smartphones and tablets are similar devices, differentiated by the former typically having a smaller screen size, and the smartphone will have a smaller screen size, and most tablets lacking cellular networking capability. Right? That's the two differences. Since 2010, crossover touchscreen smartphones with the screens larger than 5 inches have been released. That size is generally considered larger than the traditional smartphone, creating the hybrid category of the phablet. Phone plus tablet is called phablet by Forbes and other publications. Now, phablet is a portmanteau of phone and tablet. At the time of the introduction of first phablets, they had screens of 5.3 to 5.5 inches, but as of 2017, screen sizes up to 5.5 inches are considered typical. Examples of phablets from 2017 and onward are the Samsung Galaxy Note series. It's a newer models of 5.7 inches. Or the LG V10, V20, it's 5.7 inches. Sony Xperia XA Ultra, the Huawei Mate 9, they're all 5.9 inches. And the Huawei Honor, it is 7 inch. Huawei Honor MediaPad X2, it's a 7-inch screen. So these are all phablet. Now let's come to 2-in-1. 2-in-1, that is 2-in-1. The 2-in-1 PC is a hybrid or a combination of tablet and laptop computer that has the features of both. What is that? Distinct from tablets, 2-in-1 PCs all have physical keyboards, but they are either concealable by folding them back and under the touchscreen or a detachable. Okay, that's how we can fold it. 2-in-1s typically also can display a virtual keyboard on their touchscreen when their physical keyboards are concealed or detached. Some 2-in-1s have processors and other operating systems like those of laptops such as Windows 10, while having the flexibility of operation as a tablet. Further 2-in-1s may have typical laptop I/O ports such as USB 3 and display ports, and may connect to a traditional PC peripheral devices and external displays. Simple tablets are mainly used as a media consumption devices, while 2-in-1 have a capacity for both media consumption and a content creation. And thus 2-in-1s are often called laptop or desktop replacement computers. There are two varieties of 2-in-1s. First one is a convertibles. Convertibles have a chassis design by which the physical keyboard can be concealed by a flipping, just folding the keyboard behind the chassis. Examples include 2:1 2-in-1 pieces of Lenovo Yoga series. You remember Yoga series? That has got detachable, flipping the keyboard. Second one is a detachable or a hybrid that have physical keyboards that may be detached from their chassis. Even while the two-in-one is operating, you can detach the keyboard. Examples is Asus Transformer Pad and Book Series or iPad Pro or Microsoft Surface Book or Surface Pro. Those are all the detachable keyboard screens. Next one is a gaming tablet. Some tablets are modified by adding physical gamepad buttons, such as a D-pad or a thumbsticks for better gaming experience. Combined with the touch screen and other features of a typical tablet computer. Most of these tablets are targeted to run native OS games or emulator games. For example, NVIDIA's Shield tablet with an 8-inch display and a running Android is an example. This runs Android games purchased from Google Play Store. PC games can also be streamed to the tablet from computers with some higher end models like NVIDIA powered video cards. The Nintendo Switch Hybrid Console is also a gaming tablet that runs on a Nintendo Switch system software, features detachable Joy-Con controller with the motion controls and 3 gaming modes. Next one is a tabletop mode using its kickstand, traditional docked TV mode and a handheld mode. There are many varieties. You can see the tablet for gaming tablet. The last one is a booklet. The booklets are dual touchscreen tablet computers with a clamshell design that can fold like a laptop. Example, Microsoft Courier, which was discontinued in 2010. The Sony Tablet P, it's a flop. And the Toshiba Libretto W100 series. These are all called booklet. Nobody is using booklet nowadays. Next, let's see about the smartphone. A smartphone is a portable device. That combines mobile network telephone and computing functions into one unit. They are distinguished from feature phones by their stronger hardware capabilities and extensive mobile operating systems, which facilitate wider software, internet, that's including web browsing over media, mobile broadband, and multimedia functionalities, including music, video, camera, and gaming, alongside core phone functions such as voice call, text messaging. That's called smartphone. Smartphones typically contain a number of metal oxide semiconductor integrated circuit chips, include various sensors that can be leveraged by pre-included and a third-party software such as magnetometer, proximity sensor, barometer, gyroscope, accelerometer, and more. And it can support wireless communication protocols such as Bluetooth, Wi-Fi, or satellite navigation. Earlier, smartphones were marketed primarily towards the enterprise market, attempting to bridge the functionality of a standalone personal digital assistant devices with the support for cellular telephony, but were limited by their bulky form, short battery life, slow analog cellular network, and the immaturity of wireless data services. Those days it looked like a brick. It looks like a brick. These issues were eventually resolved with the exponential scaling and miniaturization of MOS transistors down to sub-micron level. That's called Moore's law. You know Moore's law? For every 5 years, the micron level will be halved. Moore's law. The improved lithium ion battery. Now batteries are massive, right? So these are all advantages. First one is a MOS transistor, miniaturization of MOS transistor. Second one is a lithium ion battery. And the next one is a faster digital mobile data network. That is Edholm's law. EDHOLMS law. And more mature software platforms that allowed mobile device ecosystems to develop independently of data providers. In the 2000s, NTT company, it's called Docomo, that has bought one platform called iMode platform. Okay, that is one. And BlackBerry is another one. And Nokia Symbian platform and Windows Mobile, they began to gain market traction with the models often featuring QWERTY keyboard or resistive touchscreen input, and emphasizing access to push emails and wireless internet. But following the rising popularity of the iPhones in the late 2000, the majority of smartphones have featured thin, slate-like form factors with large capacitive screens with the support for multi-touch gestures rather than a physical keyboard, and offer the ability for users to download or purchase additional applications from a centralized store and use cloud storage and synchronization, virtual assistants, as well as mobile payment services. Smartphones have largely replaced PDAs. They have replaced it. That's a handheld palm-sized PCs and portable media players. It has replaced everything. Smartphone has replaced everything, including the alarm, right? You remember? Improved hardware and faster wireless communication. That's latest standard is LTE. That have bolstered the growth of smartphone industry. In the third quarter of 2012, 1 billion smartphones were in use worldwide in 2012. Global smartphone sales surpassed the sales figures for the feature phones in early 2013. Now you can see, nobody, you can't see a person who is not having a smartphone. Let us see the smartphone hardware part. A typical smartphone contains a number of metal oxide semiconductor integrated circuit chips, MOS chips, which in turn contain billions of tiny MOSFET, metal oxide semiconductor field effect transistors, right? Billions of transistors. A typical smartphone contains MOS IC chips. Now, which are the MOS? I am giving the list now. You see that. The first one is a application processor. That's a CMOS system on a chip. Flash memory. It's called, it is using floating gate MOS memory. Cellular modem using baseband RF CMOS. RF transceiver using RF CMOS. Phone camera image sensor, that is using CMOS image sensor. Power management integrated circuit, that is using power MOSFET. Display drivers using LCD or LED drivers. Wireless communication chips using Wi-Fi, Bluetooth, GPS receiver. Sound chip, it's called audio codec and power amplifier. Gyroscope. Capacitive touchscreen controller, it's a ASIC chip and DSP chip. RF power amplifier, LDMOS chip. So some are also equipped with the FM radio receiver, a hardware notification LED, and an infrared transmitter for use of remote control as a remote control. Few have additional sensors such as thermometer for measuring ambient temperature. Sometimes it may have a hygrometer for humidity. Sometimes it have a sensor for ultraviolet ray measurement. Few exotic smartphones designed around specific purposes are equipped with uncommon hardware such as a projector. Samsung company has got a Beam i8520 and a Samsung Galaxy Beam i8530. It has got a projector. Sometimes it may have optical zoom lenses, Samsung Galaxy S4 zoom or Samsung Galaxy K zoom. Sometimes some mobile phone will have a thermal camera, and even PMR 446, it's like a walkie-talkie radio transceiver. Let's see about the software, smartphone software. Mobile operating systems, or it has a mobile app and it has an application store. These three are called smartphone software. It has got a OS, it has got an app and application store. So let's see the app. Let's see the OS. A mobile operating system, that's called a mobile OS, is an operating system for phones, tablets, smartwatches, and other mobile devices. Mobile operating systems combine features of a personal computer operating system with other features useful for mobile or handheld use, usually including and most of the following considered essential in modern mobile system, that is called touchscreen, cellular, Bluetooth, Wi-Fi protected access, Wi-Fi, global positioning system, mobile navigation, video and single frame picture cameras, speech recognition, voice recorder, music player, near field communication, and infrared blaster. By 2018, in the first quarter, over 383 million smartphones were sold with 86% running Android, 86% Android, 14% running iOS. These two are the smartphone operating system, and negligible number of smartphone running over other OSs. Android alone is a more popular than the popular desktop operating system Windows. And in general smartphone use, you see that even without tablets, this exceeds desktop use actually. Android is killer nowadays. Other well-known mobile operating systems are Flame OS and Harmony OS. Mobile devices with the mobile communications abilities, that's called smartphones, contain two mobile operating systems. The main user facing software platform is supplemented by a second low-level proprietary real-time operating system, which operates the radio and other hardwares. There are two operating systems. One is a user-friendly or user-facing software platform. Another one is a proprietary real-time RTOS, real-time operating system. Research has shown that these low-level systems may contain a range of security vulnerabilities, permitting malicious base stations to gain high levels of control over the mobile devices. So you have to be a little careful. Next one is a mobile app. What is mobile app? Mobile app is a computer program designed to run on a mobile device such as smartphone. The term app is a short form of the term software application. Okay, mobile app. App means application. Next one is the application stores. See, the introduction of Apple's App Store for the iPhone and iPad Touch in July 2008, correct. That has popularized manufacturer-hosted online distribution for third-party applications focused on a single platform. There are a huge variety of apps, including video games, music products, and other business tools. Up until that point, smartphone application distribution depended on third-party sources providing applications for multiple platforms such as GetJar, Handago, Handmark, Pocket Gear kind of thing. Following the success of App Store, other smartphone manufacturers launched application stores such as Google's Android Market. Later it is renamed as Google Play Store. Earlier it was Google's Android Market. And RIM's BlackBerry App World, Android related app stores like Aptoide, Caf Bazaar, F-Droid, GetJar, and Opera's mobile store. In February 2014, 93% of mobile developers were targeting smartphones first for mobile app developments. The last topic today is a smartwatch. Smartwatch is a wearable computer in the form of watch. Modern smartwatch provide a local touchscreen interface for daily use, while an associated smartphone app provides for management and telemetry, such as long-term biomonitoring. That's there. Your phone can be connected. While early models could perform basic tasks such as calculations, digital time telling, translations, and game playing, 2010 smartwatches have more general functionality closer to smartphones, including mobile apps, a mobile operating system, and a Wi-Fi or a Bluetooth connectivity. Some smartwatches functions as portable media players with a FM radio and a playback of digital audio or video files via a Bluetooth headset. Some models called watch phones have mobile cellular functionality like making calls. While internal hardware varies, most have an electronic visual display, either backlit LCD or OLED. Some use transflective or electronic paper to consume less power. They are generally powered by a rechargeable lithium ion battery. Peripheral devices may include digital cameras, thermometers, accelerometers, pedometers, heart rate monitors, altimeters, barometers, compasses, GPS receivers, tiny speakers, and micro SD cards, which are recognized as a storage device by many other kind of computers. Software may include digital maps, schedulers, and personal organizers, calculators, and various kinds of watch faces. The watch may communicate with external devices such as sensors, wireless headsets, or a heads up display. Like other computers, smartwatch may collect information from internal or external sensors, and it may control or retrieve data from other instruments or computers. It may support wireless technology such as Bluetooth, Wi Fi, GPS. For many purposes, a watch computer serves as a front end of a remote system such as smartphone, communicating with the smartphone using various wireless technologies. Smartwatches are advancing, especially their design, battery capacity, and health related applications. Health related applications include applications measuring heart rate, SpO2, and workouts, etc. Let's see the typical features of smartwatch. Many smartwatch models manufactured in 2010s are completely functional as a standalone product. Some are used in sports, the GPS tracking unit being used to record historical data. For example, after a workout, data can be uploaded onto a computer or online to create a log of activities for analysis or sharing. Some watches can serve as a full GPS watches, displaying maps and current coordinates and recording tracks. Users can mark their current location and then edit the entry's name and coordinates, which enables navigation to those new coordinates. As companies add competitive products into the market, media space is becoming a desired commodity on smartwatches. With Apple, Sony, Samsung, and Motorola introducing their smartwatch models, 15% of tech consumers wear wearable technologies. The functionality of these watches attracts tech consumers who possess buying power, which has attracted many advertisers. It is expected for mobile advertising on wearable devices to increase heavily by 2017 as advanced hyper targeting modules are introduced to these devices. In order for an advertisement to be effective on smartwatch, companies have started stating that the ad must be able to create experiences native to the smartwatch itself. Sport watch functionality often includes activity tracker feature, also known as fitness tracker, as seen in GPS watches made for training, diving, and outdoor sports. Functions may include training programs such as intervals, lap times, speed display, GPS tracking unit, route tracking, dive computer, heart rate monitor compatibility, cadence sensor compatibility, and compatibility with sport transitions like triathlons. Other watches can cooperate with an app in a smartphone to carry out their functions. They are paired usually by the Bluetooth with a smartphone. Some of these only work with the phone that runs the same mobile operating system. Others use a unique watch OS operating system, and otherwise they are able to work with some most smartphones. Paired, the watch may function as a remote to the phone. This allows the watch to display data such as calls, SMS messages, emails, calendar invites, and any data that may be made available by relevant phone apps. Some fitness tracker watches use reports that will generate a report, user reports, in the number of kilometer they walked, hours they slept, kind of thing. So it's a fitness tracker watch. LTE. It's a starting from around 2014. Several manufacturers started to release smartwatches with the LTE. Watch smartphones are autonomous versus connected watches like LTE. What is the use of LTE? It will allow for direct connection, 3G or 4G connection to the general telephone networks, just like any other smartphone. And it has got long lasting batteries. Smartwatch has got long lasting batteries. Long battery life lasts about 30 days on a single charge, plus 20 more with the time and activity tracking only. Some watches use a button battery for time with a longer lasting periods. Okay, what are the operating systems used in smartwatch? Flame OS. The Flame OS, the firmware based on Android operating system by Meizu, Meizu. Sometimes Wear OS. Wear OS, previously known as Android Wear, is a smartwatch operating system developed by Google. Next one is the Watch OS. Watch OS is a proprietary mobile operating system developed by Apple to run on the Apple Watch. It's called Watch OS. Tizen. Tizen is a Linux-based operating system for various platforms including smartwatches. Tizen is a project within the Linux Foundation and is governed by Technical Steering Group TSG, composed of Samsung and Intel among others. Samsung released the Samsung Gear 2 Neo, Samsung Gear S, Samsung Gear S2 and Samsung Gear S3 running this Tizen. So Samsung watches are having Tizen. Google watches are, Apple watches are having Watch OS. Google watches are having Wear OS. And Meizu, Android watches. It's a Flame OS. Some Android Wear watches devices are having Asteroid OS. It's an open source for firmware. Some Sailfish smartwatches, they are using Sailfish OS, that is Linux based operating system. Ubuntu Touch is a OS which is developed by Canonical UK Limited and Ubuntu community for various mobile platforms including smartwatches. It's a Ubuntu Touch. It is designed primarily for touchscreen mobile devices such as smartwatches and smartphones or tablets. Infinitime. That's one OS. Infinitime is a default firmware for the PineTime smartwatch produced by Pine64. It is a community project based on FreeRTOS as well as being free software license under the GNU, it's called General Public License. It supports Android, desktop Linux and PinePhone and Sailfish OS as a companion devices for features such as music playback, call, text notification, navigation instruction and time synchronization. Now, smartwatches for children and the elderly, that is very important. In China, since around 2015, smartwatches have become widely used by school children. They are advertised on television throughout China as a safety device whereby the child can call in case of emergency. The devices are commonly colorful and made of plastic. They normally have no display unless a button is pushed. These smartwatches have limited capability compared to other smartwatches. Their main function consists of being able to conduct calls or displaying of time, or sometimes have an air temperature or sensitivity. They cost around 8,000 to 16,000. They are also offered in the US by companies such as Timex for T-Mobile or Gizmo Watch for Verizon. Some smartwatches can also help elderly person with dementia by reporting their location to a caretaker in case they get lost or if they fall. So these are the advantages of beneficial social benefits of smartwatches. Think about it. What we are reading, what we are learning, these are all new technologies. See, the new technology will give benefit to the humankind and give benefit to the society. Always being an engineer, think about the beneficial always to the society. Okay, so thanks a lot for this session, for your patient listening in this session. See you then.